Hey there, boys, girls, and squirrels. My name is Modstab, and welcome back to some Minecraft. I just feel like I get more I'm sorry, bottle. I get more sporadic with my hands every time I start one of these intros. But it's okay. We're good. So today is a little different. So Mondays, usually I try to do some variation of like a tutorial series. Where I just show you how to build certain buildings and things like that. But I thought it'd be really cool to kind of slow down for a minute here. Since I've just finished a couple bigger builds, I wouldn't say huge builds. There's a lot of things I learned in those builds, both that I tried to like apply in those builds, but also things that I didn't do in those builds that I kind of learned afterwards, thinking, wow, this would have brought in a lot of depth to my stuff. So as you can see, there's a little line here. Now there's more than I think I went with 7 totally different builds. And there's more than 7 kind of builds here because I wanted to kind of show a point, I guess, for lack of a better term, on some options that might be available to you. So this is more specifically designed for inspiration. I'm not going to walk you through how to build these. I'm going to give you the real quick, just peanut butter spread right across the top, and then just let the inspiration kind of flow for you guys. We're gonna clear the weather real quick. There we go. Get out of here, weather, and then we're gonna time set day, baby. That's right. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into this. So first and foremost, I wanted to start off with some ideas for maybe unconventional, maybe survival homes where you wanted it to look a lot nicer, but you didn't want it to take up a bunch of extra space. For instance, storage being one of those things. So I just went ahead and I got some good old stripped oak planks. I have some smooth quartz. You guys can go ahead and use whatever you want. This is just to get the idea across. But on the top here, I went ahead and I used barrels because, one, it creates a lot of trim, but it also gives you a bunch of storage if you're going to surround everything with this. Now, this isn't going to be the cheapest of builds here, but it is going to be one of those more aesthetically pleasing ones, but also it's going to be a wall that's going to give you that extra storage that you need. Now, we're going to go off to this next spot. You guys, I know if you guys play Minecraft at all, you've kind of played around with this. Kudos to you. But we kind of have the same idea where we went with a wall. And I kind of put these side by side so you can kind of get a feel for it. And there's a couple of things that I want to talk about in this build. First and foremost, that's going to be using unconventional objects as walls. Now, we did something over here like that as well. But don't be afraid to use something like this. Now, this is going to be more of a fan favorite for you people who use creative out there. But we started by doing something like this, where you have the loom, as well as a empty bookshelf, so to speak. So it can be both trim and it can be an empty bookshelf. Now, I did use this in one of my bigger castle builds, so I thought it'd be really cool to bring this out for you guys and show you kind of how it works in practical use here. And then we have, once again, on the top, I'm a big fan of having trim on the top with more modern style builds. I think it just really, it makes it feel a little more modern, gives you a little more depth, a little more texture change. So you have the loom backwards right up here, right? And that kind of just replicates what's going down here. But you also have the loom on its forward axis. So let's go ahead and get one of these looms. So if you place a loom forward, you're going to get something like this, right? But now if you place it backwards, or in the opposite direction, like let's say I want this portion to be facing that way, I face it this way. So this is always the back side of loom. This is always the front side. So it kind of gives you a couple options when it comes to trim and things like that, just to give you a little bit more depth in your build. And the last thing I'm going to outline on this second portion right here is just the difference between having, like, let's say a full block on the top. And I'm going to be a little closer to this because I think this shows off the point a little bit better. So let's say you're standing right here. You can see the very tippy top of that full block scale, but over here, you can't. Now, obviously, if you step a little further back, you can see either one. But as you can kind of tell, strafing back and forth, it just makes it feel so much more roomier. And it also gives you the option to do these half block style for trim. And I just think that's something cool to point out that I've really recently started playing with is, should I have a full block here or should I do a slab instead? And it just creates a lot more depth. So it's something to consider as you're putting time into building walls and things like that. Now, this one here is one of those cases of, this is an example, right? So you can just see, like, everybody everybody has started here in Minecraft. Like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna build a castle. I'm gonna build the coolest castle wall. And you come up with something like this. Why? Because it's easy. You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, like all castle walls they're flat, and then they have these little pillars. And that's kind of true, but you want to be able to create a lot more depth and a lot more character into this thing. So like right here, pretty flat, pretty boring. Now if you come next door, it's the same exact spacing. So it takes a little bit more depth, so you'll have to keep in mind of that. But it's the exact same spacing as far as how many blocks we have to work with for height and width. Now the difference is going to be the depth here. So we have some slabs that we alternated with, and then we actually did upside down staircases, then we did regular staircases and whatnot, just to create a little bit more depth. Now what we did here, on top of those upside down staircases, we put the stone walls. Now what that does is that really creates a lot of depth. There's a lot of dimension to it. You have forwards, you have backwards, you have ups, you have downs inside of this wall. So it just makes it a lot more exciting, a lot more enticing to the eye. Now what I did on the backside was inlaid some cracked stone bricks here, because it gives the wall a little bit of texture. Now one thing you can also do to really spice things up is don't be afraid to, you know, use different colors, you know. We're gonna clear this weather up. I know that I can set the duration to weather clear to be longer, but it's kind of my shtick now, right? Every time I start recording, weather is just, it bombards me, it keeps going. So it's went from kind of a nuisance into something fun. Anyway, so you go in here and feel free to just sporadically pop them wherever you want. Obviously, there are some options that are gonna be a little bit better, but feel free to put this kind of stuff in there. What it's going to do is it's going to spice up a lot of color. Now, if you do have, like, let's say, like a coat of arms or a flag that you're doing, try to inlay a color that matches with that. Maybe put, you know, like banners. Let's drop a banner down here. Let's say your coat of arms is red. Go ahead and drop a banner in. Just be creative with it. Don't feel like you're stuck with just what the one-dimensional block has for you. So this is kind of an example of a great option for maybe adding a little aesthetic appeal to walls. Now, once again, be creative. Like, don't just replicate what I did here. This just shows you how much you can do with, like, stone walls and slabs and stairs and chiseled blocks. And then you have this, like, the mossy stone. Just mix it up. Mix it up. Have a little bit of fun. Create that depth, because that's going to make something like this look so much more exciting, both from a distance as well as up close. And now we went over here, and this one seems like a really obvious one, like Devin. This is the same thing you did on the front. Well, a lot of people get disheartened about trying to do these creative builds because it's going to look the same on the outside as it is on the inside. Well, here's your solution. Do not be afraid to go too thick, okay? So put a outside wall, exterior wall. You can make this whatever you want in whatever aesthetic you want, and it's not gonna mess with the inside at all. All right, and I left this as a beginning because just same as I did it like the beginning and this one of the second builds with the loom here is sometimes if you're gonna try to be creative with having exterior and interior, you wanna have like windows, let's say. Well, you want those windows to be starting at that second block height because that's how tall your character is, right? You wouldn't want to start it at 3 because you wouldn't see anything. So this is kind of what you want. But it does present kind of a frustrating situation here. So you look at this right here and you have this top grill. Like, this is not aesthetically pleasing at all. It doesn't match the smooth textures. It doesn't match this color scheme. It's kind of off in its own. So what you might want to do, let's say if you, whether it's too deep or otherwise, let's say you have a window here, right? Well, there's a couple things you can do, right? I'm gonna go ahead and just do oak stairs just for the time being because it matches. And then you can go planks. So you could do one of two things. You could plank it up. Kind of boring. It matches the outside more than it does the inside. It really doesn't add much aesthetic appeal. But I'm a big fan of doing stairs. Why? Because this can essentially, at that point, be turned into like a little reading nook. You know, you're kind of hanging out, reading a book and things like that. This is a inlaid reading nook, which is pretty popular. It's a really cool aesthetic feature because you got the natural light from the outside kind of showing things off. So for this one, don't be afraid to go too thick. You can always add an exterior wall and then build the interior on top of that. It'll create a lot more depth. And this is something I wish I would have done a lot more as I was building my castle build. All right, let's clear our inventory up. And then you got the reading nook. It's just a classy little add-on for those, excuse me, for those tricky situations where, you know, you don't know what to do with texturing. And you go over here, and I did this as an example. So when I was doing my castle wall, or my giant castle series, I built pretty much flat walls, right? It was kind of boring. And I know this trick is a little bit of a cop-out, so to speak, because we kind of vaguely talked about this a little earlier. But let's say you build this giant thing. You have all the flat stuff, and you don't want to go delete everything. So like, for instance, on here, right? This is totally scrapping it. So you're getting rid of all the top. You're putting stairs upside down here. So you're scrapping the full top of the building, right? Maybe you don't have the time, or don't have the energy, don't have the desire to scrap the entire top of this building to remake it and make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Well, you can do something like this. And this is what I did for my castle build, right? And this is where I talked about maybe if I would have known this earlier, or one of the other things earlier, this wouldn't have been a problem. But let's say you don't want to destroy anything. You just want to take what you have here and add some depth to it. Well, very similar to showing you guys how to build a wall with more depth, you can kind of just add that onto a flat wall. For the most part, there's a couple aesthetic things you are limited to. Weather! There are a couple aesthetic things you are limited to. And what I mean by that is, unless you want to delete these guys, you're not going to have those matriculations that are going to come out here and give you a little bit more depth on the walkway. You're not going to be able to inlay a lot of things. You know, like let's say a great example of that would be, let's say you go back here, right? And we're going to take this, and we're just going to put this here. Now, if you don't want to, let's say, destroy the wall, this isn't going to be an option. And this is a great way to create a lot more depth in your build. And you can actually inlay different things in there to create a different aesthetic appearance. But now we're talking about you built this giant flat wall and you don't know what to do. Fortunately, it's very similar to that previous one. You can add some stairs, you can add some slabs, you can add some walls, right? So you can see that it kind of already has a lot of this depth. And one of my favorite ones is trying to add some creative style for trim. Now, there's a couple ways you can approach this. I have a couple, I guess, more organic style shapes in the Minecraft universe, you know, with a couple upside down stairs, kind of creates this rounded edge on a very small scale, obviously, just like all the rest of these buildings. You have the upside down stairs to really kind of connect it. Now, if you wanted to be brave, you could do stuff like this. You could go ahead and put it upside down here, right? And then you're going to want to, get up, get going, baby boy. Whoopsies. Okay, we're just going to delete this so that I have that space. Now, you can do something like this, and then you could round that off. Whoopsies, wrong one. You know, and you have something like this where it's got that more of a solid feel, and you can put it upside down if you want it to be that way. A great example would be just kind of replicating that back to this side here. I should put it this way. What am I doing? What am I doing, y'all? You can tell that I'm great at this whole building thing, right? And it kind of creates this whole idea of having like a support line, so to speak, throughout these little walkie-doos. And then you can do whatever you want here, you know, like let's say you start a slightly different aesthetic there just to give yourself some space. You put stairs everywhere, it looks horrible, so don't do that. That was a little bit of a sporadic nature, but it just goes to show you, just create shapes, create depths, a lot of forward and backward depth. So for instance, like, would something like this, not very exciting. Something where you add, let's say, a little bit of depth to that wall. A little bit more exciting, you know, right? And then something like this, even doing something like this, like that's a lot more exciting because it creates so many different layers and different depths. So it's all about kind of creating some organic shapes that are a little bit more fun. And that's gonna kind of bring us here. And now this last one, this is not a wall design. Do not do this. It's horrible. This, for me, is kind of a culmination of some of the ideas that I've been talking about here. Do not be afraid to experiment with any block. Now, this one's a very specific example. It's all, as you guys can tell, different types of stone. You have regular stone on the bottom, cobblestone, mossy cobblestone, stone brick, mossy stone brick, chiseled brick. You have a cobblestone wall, mossy stone wall, and a stone wall. Now, the reason I wanted to do this and didn't make any type of aesthetic, I guess, piece out of it is it's a very similar reason to why I have that mossy stone behind some of the pillars and things like that on that castle wall. Don't be afraid to mix and match blocks to maybe fit the aesthetic you're going for. Now, we have a lot of gray in here, and sometimes, quite frankly, you're not going to figure out what you want until you start adding colors. So let's grab just a few different aesthetic pieces here and try to show off that option of you can really do whatever you want if you're willing to take the time and experiment and play around, right? So we got a couple options here. So if you were to inlay this guy in there, right? It's kind of boring, but you know what? That gives it a little bit more depth. When we go over here and we add this, well, if you're tying in some purple aesthetic, things like that, it might be a great option for you. And finally, if we go in here, you know, it's kind of replication of, let's say I like that red a little bit better, so we're going to get rid of this. Now let's throw this in here. Now this is a little deeper, right? So we're going to clear everything out here. But feel free to experiment. Play around with different textures, different colors. Now this guy, I think, does fit in a little bit more seamless with the aesthetic here, right? As it does match some of those darker tones in that gray. Now here's a little bit more conscious. Let's say you're trying to go with something a little fancier. This is going to be something where that block may very well be the primary. Weather clear, baby. This block may very well be the primary because it mixes a little bit. It has some of those blue tones that you get with gray, right? But it just doesn't quite settle in as nicely outside of the fact that it has a very similar tone to these bricks here. So maybe you can use it as an aesthetic piece for maybe a logo design that's inlaid into the building, but not the primary option. And then finally, you got something like this. Now this is, once again, a little bit more of a color separation specifically than really trying to tie it in. So let's say you're going for windows or a mage build or something where you want as many different particles as possible. Looking at blocks like these redstone kind of blocks here, they have a lot of different color variations inside that one specific block. So don't be afraid to take something like this and make it into something of your own. Like a great idea would be, I instantly think of maybe some type of eye on a robot or a dragon when I see this, because it has that centralized location that's really dark, gets a little bit brighter, and then it's much, much brighter around the edge. So play around, mess around, have a good old time. Thank you guys so much for joining me in kind of this little walkthrough and maybe tricks, tips, ideas video, however you guys want to word it. Feel free to take anything I've done here, expand on it. And if you guys did, feel free to throw it down in the comment section down below. Maybe give me a link to your guys' video. Obviously, those will have to be approved on my channel to make sure they're not some crazy, you know, link off into the middle of nowhere to somebody's watching their prawn. I gotta make sure. You never know. But feel free to do that. And then maybe send me a picture on Facebook. I am on there as well. Any of these links can be found in the description down below, by the way. Let me know what you guys did. Maybe you took like this build here. Maybe you guys saw the castle build I was doing, and as you were following along, you're like, if you would have just done this or tweaked this, it would have been so much better. I always love to hear that kind of feedback. It shows me where I can improve. But it's really nice to reminisce, you know, like where you've actually come from as a builder. Like this was my jam. This is what I did. I spent so much time trying to build this type of wall because I wanted to build giant, huge castles, and I never took the time to focus on the details and the little things. All of these walls, as you can see, are very small scale walls. These are doable by one person, and they're editable by one person. You can replicate this guy here, and however aesthetic you want to go. Maybe you don't like the chisel there. You can replicate this hundreds of times, and now you have this huge, just gigantic wall that you can then put a village inside of. But as always, I'm gonna stop rambling there. You know, I think I've got carried away. I got my point across. Thank you guys so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, as those are great tools for you to let me know what you like, didn't like, what you want to see next. Thank you for joining me in the video. If you guys have any tricks or tips, once again, feel free to pop those down in the comment section down below. without further ado, I think I'm gonna shut my filthy little cake hole. This video's gone on plenty long enough. Remember, hit the bell notification icon to stay up to date what we're doing on this channel. I'm gonna go ahead and say it now. Mondays, Minecraft Monday. Tuesdays and Fridays, we're gonna do whatever story-rich game we're playing. Thursdays, it's kind of up in limbo, but right now I've been doing a Scottish Minecraft Village Let's Build series, and we'll finish things off with Wednesday, which is my favorite day because we have a 9 to 5, which is an 8-hour live stream. I've really been enjoying it. I've really been enjoying your guys' feedback. And one last quick update before we get out of here. Climbing a little closer to that 100 subscriber benchmark. Remember, as soon as we hit 100 subscribers, I'm going to do a subscriber giveaway where we're doing Amazon gift card. We may split that into a couple different gift cards. That way we can have a couple different people win, because if I could, I would just buy gift cards for all the subscribers, right? But I don't make that kind of money. Now, that being said, thank you guys so much for joining me. Remember, as always, I love you guys, and we will see you next time. Toodles!